A British soldier who was kidnapped by Russian-backed forces in Ukraine claimed that while he was being tortured, he was made to repeatedly listen to Mamma Mia by ABBA. Wondering how that could be a form of torture? Hey there guys, what's happening and welcome back to our channel. We hope you're all doing well. Keep watching this video to find out how Russians torture British prisoner with ABBA music. Details of the British prisoner's torture. 48-year-old Shaun Pinner, who was freed as part of a prisoner swap arranged by Saudi Arabia, claimed he had been electrocuted, stabbed, and forced to listen to the Mamma Mia soundtrack. Additionally, the only food provided to him was stale bread and tainted water. Mr. Pinner was transferred to a different cell after receiving a death sentence from Russian courts in June, but the music torture persisted. He told The Sun, "The conditions were better, but they still played music, and this time it was believed by Cher. We had our bad times, and I cried a lot of them. The past 6 months have been the worst days of my life, but we had to hold on to some kind of hope, and that's how I survived. I never want to see a loaf of bread or hear an ABBA song again. I simply feel so lucky to be at home." Mr. Pinner has returned to his Potton, Bedfordshire home with his family. In the covert agreement between Russia and Ukraine, 9 additional foreign detainees were also released, including Aiden Aslin, 28, who claimed that he had been beaten, stabbed, and made to listen to Soviet music. When Mariupol was under siege in April, Mr. Aslin's battalion gave up and was taken to Donetsk, where he was subjected to harsh interrogation. Mr. Aslin claimed he wanted to cry after learning of his death sentence, but was unable to do so because it was a matter of surviving. When in captivity, you must follow their instructions or face the consequences. Pinner added that your life is in the hands of these people. Roman Abramovich, the former owner of Chelsea Football Club, is known to have contributed to the prisoners' release. Along with John Harding, Dylan Healy, and Andrew Hill, he boarded his private jet and welcomed Mr. Pinner and Mr. Aslin. As they flew to Saudi Arabia, the men were fed steak and given iPhones so they could call their families. Music as a form of torture. It's possible to wage psychological battle with music. The act is occasionally referred to as music torture. Although it's acknowledged by U.S. interrogation experts to be uncomfortable, it's also said to have no long-term effects. Historically, interrogation techniques that included music and sound are now considered to be torture by international organizations. They've been used as the foundation for the widely discussed torture in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib because they attack all senses without leaving any visible signs of abuse. However, they were developed much earlier in the 1950s and in the first half of the 1960s as a response to alleged Soviet brainwashing. The continuous playing of music or other sounds is referred to as noise torture or sound torture, and it's been combined with sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, food and drink deprivation, and stress positions. A walking nightmare for Pinner. Pinner claims that he called his wife and gave her his death message because he knew it was that bad. But what shocked him more was that his wife didn't even cry and refused to be upset. At that point, Pinner, a contract soldier with the Ukrainian army, had given up all hope of being freed alive. She simply shouted at me, telling me that I was a fighter and that I would live. When he finally managed to escape his captor's captivity, he told a UK news outlet, "Those were the last words I heard from her and they kept me going." Pinner had to endure a lot more before being released though. When a particular incident descended into carnage because the Russians ambushed Pinner and his troop on foot with motor bombs and artillery, he made a statement about it. They had never faced a situation like this in a war and were all terrified for their lives. Pinner continued by saying that there were so many bodies that it reminded him of a zombie apocalypse. When prodded further, he remembered, "I was surrounded by Russian separatists. They stripped me and purposely stabbed me in the thigh. For 20 minutes, they beat the living daylights out of me." The former soldier detailed how his captors tortured him with electric current as another method. It was an intense shock. Each time, they performed it for 40 seconds. Pinner told media outlets it seemed like they were just doing it for fun. "A guy came in and put a pistol to the back of my head, cocked it, and said, 'You're going to die now,' he said." Pinner was positive that it would be the end of him, but then the guy holding the pistol to his head started laughing and said he was joking and pistol whipped Pinner. How the CIA used music in USA to break prisoners. The use of music as a no-touch torture tool at the Cobalt detention facility is specifically mentioned in the report. The report states that detainees were kept in complete darkness and completely shackled in isolated cells with loud noise and music, and only a bucket to use for human waste there. This means that the same song or album is frequently played on repeat at extremely loud volumes to keep detainees awake for hours on end, as we know from previous torture reports from Guantanamo Bay. Music was used to create fear, disorient, and prolong capture shock, according to an AP report from 2008 on conditions for prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. In addition to wearing down an opponent until they were broken, music was reportedly used by the CIA to trigger a detainee that another round of interrogation was about to start. In conclusion, only rawhide is specifically mentioned in CIA reports as having been used as a form of torture. As far as we're aware, there was no formalized torture playlist devised by CIA. But let us know your thoughts on the subject. Do you think playing music can be an effective psychological torture technique in warfare?